Now, do we have challenges in the evolution of the medium? No question, and we're all working on those, and they're fascinating. Do we have challenges in the underlying business models? Salon knows that inside out, absolutely. Do we have challenges in how people are compensated for their work? Yes. But bottom line, and we'll figure some of those out or we won't figure some of those out, but frankly, I think that's irrelevant to our objective of generating and seeing existing large quantities of quality journalism. Quality journalism does not have to be built on the foundation of a successful business model. I.F. Stone proved that in the 50s, and there are bloggers proving that today. I.F. Stone. Josh Marshall, who won the Polk Award last year for his investigative journalism on the U.S. attorney scandal. You know, a blogger, you know, working with a half a dozen interns in a sloppy little office in lower Manhattan. Not $1 million operation, not even close. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, there are challenges, but I have no doubts about the future.
Well, I'm happy that you're optimistic. The question is, though, I think we can take the issue of will there be journalism? There will always be journalism, just as there will always be art. Nevertheless, the uncomfortable fact remains that it appears that a very large portion of those who are going to be doing this journalism may not be getting paid. The biggest surprise in this room today was the few times that somebody said on one of these video vignettes, "Oh, we pay all of our writers." Do you see this as a kind of bumpy ride on the way to an even happier golden moment, or is it that the circumstances in the last 40 years were unique, and we just have to bid adieu?
It may very well be, and we don't know. The jury is definitely out on to me, the biggest open question is not about will there be great journalism, not about will there be great investigative journalism, not will there be great arts journalism. Mm-hmm. The open question is, you know, will this industry, if you can call it an industry that, you know, in the last year supported 75,000 full-time professionally paid journalists, support those kinds of numbers going forward as full-time, well-paid journalists? Don't know. You know, when people talk about the success and the demise of newspapers, what we often forget is, like, this was not some long-term successful model. It wasn't. It was really only hugely successful from a business perspective from about 1960 to about 2000. And interestingly, only because of the disruption of television, which turned struggling newspapers in highly competitive 5 newspaper towns to 1 newspaper town.
So we could thank television for those few fat years.
For those few fat years. Yeah. And I don't, by no means, you know, I think there's great hope for people who want to be entrepreneurial and go out there and write and make some money. How much they make, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Like anything else, I mean, we'll see some who do, some voices who rise to the top and do well. But many will write and write well and be enjoyed and will be doing it as people have forever, right, out of the joy of doing it.
Well, Deborah, let's just say that Richard leaves some room for the possibility that much of this won't be paid for by the open market. There are many today, as you know, who in response to this sort of business conundrum have suggested and have even put into various plans to suggest that philanthropy should come to the rescue, much as it has in other walks of life where the marketplace hasn't provided full and complete coverage of the issues at hand. That there is, if you will, a public interest if the market can't make it work. So do you foresee cultural journalism becoming routinely acknowledged as a kind of non-profit 501c3 enterprise? And if not, why not?
Well, the first thing I would have to say, András, is that I'm very glad that Sasha said I wasn't responsible for speaking for all foundations. Because there are more than 70,000 organizations in the United States alone that are classified as foundations. They're a very diverse group, much more diverse than if you chose a category like universities or museums. They have their mandates that come from their founders, their legal mandates, and within that their leaders develop priorities. Those priorities can change as leaders change. So there is no one foundation position, and then foundations are just one piece of the philanthropic world too. They're corporate funders, they're wealthy individuals, etc. But so I do think foundations are a piece of the puzzle, but I don't think foundations are the whole answer.
Right.
And
Well, yeah, go on. Yeah.
no, I can go on. But,
Please.
well, and in the near term, foundations, speaking of revenue, as we have this morning, foundations are all dependent on one source of revenue, their endowments. Their endowments are all down this year and over the last year, as you know. And so for the next couple of years, anyway, most of them have to cut back their grant making, and they're doing so by honoring their existing commitments. For the most part, there are exceptions. There's some foundations who are stepping up their grant making. So there are all these organizations. They are very diverse. They have these constraints. But they're there. I mean, they're already there. There are already foundations that care about arts journalism that are funding it. So.
True, but it's fair to say that at this point in the game, the foundations that are supporting cultural journalism are by far in the minority.
Right.
Most of them support educational or training programs for the most part, and that the idea of diverting, especially from cultural philanthropy, some precious dollars to journalism is still somewhat of a controversial concept. I mean, this room may find this surprising, but there are some in the cultural world who don't like journalists.
Only in the cultural world?
So that it may be seen as taking funds out of the starving mouths of the creatives. Is there going to be a kind of, is there a chance that there might be a shift in mindset that says, well, there's a part of this that is so important to the healthy functioning of culture that foundations have to step in?
I think some foundations will step in, but it's never going to be enough for all the efforts that exist all over the country, not to mention all over the world. There are not that many foundations that fund fully nationally in the arts, and there are far fewer that fund internationally. Mm-hmm. It's probably easier regionally. Some of the examples that we saw, San Francisco or Texas, where the costs are much more modest, and you're focusing on a smaller, even if it's a big state, it's still one state. And the local, there's more reason for local funders to want to support that. So that may be easier over the long term than the big joint efforts. I don't know. But I mean, I'm speculating. I honestly don't know.